Carl Boltzmann here. Welcome back to my studio. So for the last year and a half or so, I've been making these videos where I deconstruct and reconstruct some of my favorite sampled music. And so often that has included a lot of DJ Shadow tracks. And today is no different. We're going to deconstruct DJ Shadow's Blood on the Motorway from his 2002 album, Private Press. Now this was, I think, the last DJ Shadow album that I went out to the record shop and bought. I was super excited at this time when DJ Shadow released new material, and I think it was his tour for the Private Press where I actually got to see DJ Shadow play in Toronto. It was a great show, and I remember he had a drum kit set up on stage. And as a drummer myself, I remember thinking, oh man, he's gonna have a drummer come on stage, or maybe he'll play the drums, and maybe they'll like recreate some of the famous drum breaks that he's taken over the years. But of course, that's not what happened. He just jammed out with the drummer at the end of the show on one of his tracks. And to be honest, that was a bit underwhelming, but the rest of the show was amazing. Anyway, so this track, Blood on the Motorway, in many ways defines what makes DJ Shadow so great to me as a producer and a sampler. As we'll go through this and as we deconstruct where the samples came from, you'll notice that they are all very, very obscure, like to the point where I'm not even sure how some people found some of these samples, because there is absolutely no information online about these artists and their albums and where these samples came from, which to me kind of gives DJ Shadow's music a certain magic and a certain longevity, which a lot of other music doesn't have. There's a certain timelessness to it, and in this case, you'll see as we go on the fact that all of these are samples. Even the vocals in this track are sampled. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's listen to some of DJ Shadow's Blood on the Motorway.
And now, eternity.
Betrayed your ideals betrayed you. What are you gonna do? Your eyes will not close, your tongue barely speaks, but I can still feel you.
To me, this has everything that a good DJ Shadow track should have. It has a certain emotion to it. It has a certain melancholy to it. And then, of course, it has a fantastically obscure, wonderful drum break that hasn't been heard in any other track, which, of course, has to be had in any good DJ Shadow track. Now, ever since I first heard this track, I loved it, but it was always on the edge of either being kind of philosophical, sort of deep, melancholic, or a little bit cheesy, almost a little bit too cheesy. But I think DJ Shadow landed on the right side of that, on the kind of the right sort of vibe. The cheese isn't too heavy, but it is definitely there, and definitely more so than I would say a lot of DJ Shadow tracks. And all of that comes down to the samples that he chose here. Now let's start right at the beginning. There are a couple of vocal samples here at the beginning, and the first one is this.
And now, eternity.
Now, I read in an interview that DJ Shadow was thinking a lot about death when he was writing this album, like life and death and the process of dying. And apparently this song is meant to represent kind of the first half is supposed to be life, and then there is a long silent pause in the middle of the song. And the second half is supposed to be the afterlife. Essentially, this person has died, the protagonist in the song has died, and the second half is the afterlife. And so that's kind of the theme that he's running with here. Now, that first sample comes from Heavy Gunz Industries and their track Dope on Dope from the 1971 album Dope on Dope and Dope Dupes. Now, this is basically a 1970s comedy album, which kind of reminds me a bit of Cheech and Chong's famous Dave's Not Here skit from their movie Up in Smoke, except that this isn't very funny.
If anyone offers you a Muggles, decline politely. Or if you were to smoke this seemingly innocent little hand-rolled cigarette, you might find yourself suffering a greater or lesser distortion of your visual and auditory perceptions. A minute might seem like an hour. Music might sound strangely beautiful.
This is Bill Bland. Things look pretty glum right now, but we at KNOW Radio feel sure if we keep talking loud enough and fast enough, everything will be all right.
As the scourge of dope has swept Radioland, a sort of renaissance of pop.
This has been Dope on Dope and Dope Dupes.
And now, eternity.
Now, the second sample to come in is an organ. Now, that sample comes from the Quebec-based Canadian band Offenbach and their song Edgar from 1976, the album Never Too Tender. So after that organ sample comes the main piano. So that piano sample comes from the UK group called Thomas F. Browne and their track It's Coming from the 1971 album Wednesday's Child. Now, when you listen to the beginning of this track, you'll hear the piano as it descends. And from a sampler's perspective, this is a sampler's dream because it has so many different notes that you can play with, so many different chords you can play with. And DJ Shadow fully takes advantage of that throughout Blood on the Motorway, as he kind of changes up the chord progression throughout the song to kind of keep it fresh and keep it interesting. So let's talk about how DJ Shadow used this piano sample. Like I said, it is a sampler's dream because there are so many different chords to choose from, and they can kind of be interchanged, which gives you so many options. In fact, this is one of the ways that I compose music, is I will sit at the piano and create a bunch of interesting chords in the same key that I like at a certain BPM, and then I will take it into my DAW and I will chop it up just like DJ Shadow did here, where basically I'm sampling my own music. But for someone like DJ Shadow, it's a lot more difficult because you have to go through a million records until you find something like this. So let's go ahead and listen to what he did with this sample. So the first note, now it's a little bit sharp, I think, so we're just going to bring that down a little bit. Okay, so the next note needs to be changed. So we're just going to look for those notes in here, which I think is that right there. So we're just going to take that and we'll copy and paste it over. Okay, so let's find the next note. Dun, dun. Oh, there it is. There they are. Let's just take a listen to our piano sample here. So that's sounding pretty good. Now, there's a bit of EQ on this as well. You can hear he's rolled off a lot of the high. So I'm going to do the same treatment on our sample. Anyway, that sounds pretty good, but let's move on to the next sample that comes in.
Be still now. I am with you. I am deep within you.
Now that voice right there, I cannot identify the sample, unfortunately. But there is a keyboard that comes in that we do know where it came from.
Breathe deeply. Breathe in the healing love of the universe. And breathe out the sickness which has taken you. I am with you.
So that keyboard in the background comes from a band called Illistration and their track Distant from 1970.
But now I realize that I am searching for someone I knew so very long ago. And now I understand that I may never find.
So I love the way that he used this sample in Blood on the Motorway. It almost gives it an ethereal, angelic kind of effect as this man is speaking over top.
Breathe in the healing love of the universe. And breathe out the sickness which has taken you.
Now let's talk about the next sample that comes in Blood on the Motorway. So that keyboard is unidentified, so I can't say exactly where it came from, unfortunately. But to my ear, it kind of sounds like an analog keyboard sound, and so I went ahead and recreated it. Now let's move on to the next two samples that he uses, which again are unfound, and I don't know where they came from. The first is the bass that comes in here. which is easy enough to recreate, and I'll just play that bass. Now the second one are these handbells. I love those bells so much. I love the way that he used them. You don't often hear handbells in music like this, so they really do sort of stand out. Now, I read an interview where DJ Shadow was talking about where these bells came from, and apparently they came from a high school or college recital, essentially, where they had recorded the recital, where so many DJ Shadow samples come from, because he finds these obscure records that only had like 100 or 200 copies made. And that would have been the case for these bells. So they're basically impossible to find. At this point, DJ Shadow probably doesn't even know what record he got them from. But I figured, why not go out and sample some handbells for myself? And so I did. And I sampled some bells, and I did my best to recreate the effect that he made here. Now, it's not perfect, obviously, but it does kind of get the effect down. DJ Shadow's bells are way better than what I sampled here. But you'll see why it becomes kind of important throughout the rest of this deconstruction, because by the end of the song, the bells really play a very important role. So now what I'd like to move on to are the vocals that come in the second half of this track. Now, keep in mind, DJ Shadow meant for this second half to be the afterlife after the protagonist of this song has died. And so let's have a quick listen to this vocal sample.
Have not betrayed your ideals betrayed you. What are you gonna do? Your eyes will not close, your tongue barely speaks, but I can still feel you. I can still feel you. Come relax.
And so this sample to me is almost unbelievable. I would have bet so much money on the fact that this was a vocalist that he brought in to sing over top of this track, because how the hell else would you do it? But this was actually an a cappella track. Again, completely obscure. I would love it if anyone watching has any information on this artist. They are called Marc Z, and their track is It's Easy from 1983. And the album is Zoo, which is to say SZOO-0. Now, apparently there are about 10,000 different artists named Marc Z, which I didn't know, but there appear to be, because when you Google that name, you get a lot of different options, and none of them seem to be from this album or this artist. And so I don't know how DJ Shadow found this, but like I said, it's an a cappella. It's the first track on the album, and it's just this man singing.
It's easy. It's like breathing. It's like a heartbeat.
You have not betrayed your ideals. Your ideals betrayed you. What are you gonna do? Your eyes will not close. Your tongue barely speaks. But I can still feel you.
I just love this so much, because as a producer and an engineer, and I've recorded a lot of vocalists, it's hard to get a vocalist to give this type of performance.
Have not betrayed your ideals.
Like with such projection and such emotion. But what I love about this is completely forgotten to the world. It still is. I mean, honestly, you cannot find any information about this. And yet it's on this great song by DJ Shadow, and it was featured in such a wonderful way. Anyway, so I've gone ahead and sampled this. It's not very hard. There wasn't very much to do, just really placing the pieces where they belong in the song. I should say that they're pitch shifted down by about 1.5 semitones to fit the key of DJ Shadow's Blood on the Motorway. But there isn't, again, too much to this. And so, you know, the second half of this track, the vocals come in And then it kind of repeats itself with the bass coming in here.
Eyes will not close, your tongue barely speaks.
And then the keyboards.
I can still feel you. Come relax. Grin, let the changes in. Come on, relax.
Now here's a chord change that happens here. So from here to the end of the track, when the drums come in, the chords actually change. And because that sample with the piano had so many different chords in it, DJ Shadow was really able to construct this song in such a way that, you know, the emotions kind of go from this melancholy, which it is, but then the end of the song has a bit of hopefulness to it, and it is because of the chord change that happens here.
Come on, relax. Grin, let the laughter, let the laughter, let the laughter begin. Well, come on, relax. Grin, let the changes.
So what comes in here, if we listen to DJ Shadows,
Relax. Grin, let the changes.
is the second last sample that we're going to talk about. And that is the strings from the Italian artist Franco Battiato and their track Gli Uccelli from 1981. And the album is La Voce del Padrone.
Migrano gli uccelli e migrano con il cambio di stagione, giochi di apertura.
So creating a song like this through samples is very much like baking a cake or making a dinner. It really is a product of the ingredients that you put in. And in this case, these strings are pure cheese. But they end up framing the end of this song in a wonderful way because these strings fit perfectly, and I mean perfectly, with Blood on the Motorway. There's no pitch shifting, there is no manipulation. It is cut and dry, fits perfect. Which is amazing. That almost never happens in sampling. But here we are. Now, the last sample we're going to talk about is obviously the drums. So these drums come from the US artist Charlie Musselwhite and their track Louisiana Fog from 1968. Now in this case, he doesn't use the first bar. Or the second bar. It actually comes in. The drummer kind of gets his groove by the third and fourth bar. Because if DJ Shadow had taken the break before that, you kind of hear the drummer on the bell on the ride there. It's just not as strong, and neither is the bass drum hit. So what I've done here is I've taken those two bars and I've added it to our track here. think it's so much fun to go back and recreate some of these songs with the samples that are known, and even to recreate some of the samples that, you know, haven't been found, just to kind of walk through a little bit of the process of what DJ Shadow did to create these songs. And so I really hope you enjoyed going through that with me here. Now, in your opinion, what is the best song from DJ Shadow's Private Press? This is actually my favorite track from that album, but I'd love to hear what you guys think is the best. Or maybe give me your top 3 if you don't mind in the comments below. And if you like this kind of thing, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Not that that really matters anymore. I don't know what YouTube was thinking taking away the dislike button. Not that my opinion matters at all, but as far as I'm concerned, that was a big mistake to the quality of the content you're gonna see on YouTube. So anyway, give it a thumbs up if you feel like it. Please subscribe if you like this kind of content. There's plenty more to come. I love deconstructing this stuff, and I'm not gonna stop anytime too soon. So on that note, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.